Hey guys, this is Gene Jensen, and today I want to teach you guys how to fish one of these bluff walls. Alright, bluff walls, vertical drops on the bank. I'm literally sitting in probably 30-40 feet of water. 50 feet is right there, 58 is another 5 feet further that way. This, as you can see, this is a cliff. It's a bluff wall that goes down into the water, and no matter what you call it, it's a beast. It's sometimes really difficult to fish if you aren't that experienced with it. They're one of my favorite things to fish. I've caught a ton of fish along the Tennessee River on bluff walls, from Wilson, Pickwick, all the way up to here on Chickamauga. All right, so let's go over my favorite baits to fish on a bluff wall. I'm going to start out with the one I use most of the time. I love to go along the bluff wall and pitch into little pockets, little laydowns and things like that. And there's nothing better than a Texas rigged, pegged Texas rigged creature bait. This is a biospawn craw. Got the claws dipped in JJ's Magic. It's going to be falling fairly fast, and so what you want to do with a bait is you want to have a bait that has a lot of kick to it, so it slows it down just a little bit, but then you want to give them something that's something they can react to. This chartreuse that I put on the claws is everything. It starts kicking and it comes by and it's green pumpkin, so it looks natural, but all of a sudden there's a little bit of chartreuse, which a lot of bait fish have, and they react to it and they bite it. That's what I use the majority of the time. Got 20-pound test fluorocarbon, 8:1-to-1 gear ratio reel, 7'5" medium heavy rod. It's my pitch and flipping rod, and it's a blast. It's an absolute blast. Number two falls kind of in line of the same thing, is a jig. I love to catch fish on a jig, so any chance I get, I'm gonna have one out on the deck. The weight, oh, I forgot to talk about the weight of that one, but I don't fish less than a ½ an ounce. I usually go 1/2 to 3/4 and no bigger than 1 ounce. Just a confidence deal. I don't want it to fall too slow, and I don't want it to fall super fast. But with a jig, if you got to fish it even slower, I'm going to throw, you know, a ½ ounce to a 3/4 ounce jig. Good, once again, a good flappy trailer. This one I probably would change to a chartreuse, put a little vile craw on there. Same thing, little different look, and that's about it, and love it. I've got this one on a 7'3" heavy action rod, 20-pound test fluorocarbon, 8:1-to-1 gear ratio reel. Outstanding. The third one I've got rigged on the boat today is something I can parallel the bluff wall with. I get real close to the bluff wall and I cast it out. It's going to be a spinnerbait, maybe a crankbait, a square bill if they're real shallow, but I think a spinnerbait is probably the best because you can kill it and it'll flutter down. There's a lot more things you can do with it. It can come through cover a whole lot easier, and it just doesn't get hung up. This particular spinnerbait is probably one of my favorites. Something I've been using for a really, really long time. It is a Mega Strike back spinnerbait. And I know you guys are going to ask, you know, all the details of it, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you about it. It is a jointed spinnerbait. It's got a articulating hook, and the reason for this is that when a bass hits from the side, which is what they'll be doing on a bluff wall, when they hit it from the side, it sucks that hook in and it gets a more positive hook set. The second thing that it does is that when you have the fish on, it doesn't allow the fish to gain leverage. So that accomplishes two things. They can't get off, or they have a more difficult time getting off, and it doesn't tear up your spinnerbait. You get your spinnerbait, a regular spinnerbait in, and it's just mangled by a big fish. And I usually fish really, really light wire spinnerbaits, and they'll last 4, maybe 5 fish. But this one, I've literally caught over 40 fish, well, 40 fish over 4 pounds with this thing, and it has not torn up. That was back when I was fishing at Kingfisher Society, where they have all those big fish in that little bitty lake. But and it didn't tear up. It tore up at number 41 because the spinnerbait, or the blade, came off. So it's a downright good spinnerbait, made in the USA, 100%, all that other stuff. Well, enough of that infomercial. Let's get on to the other things that I might have out. A drop shot is really good when you're fishing a bluff wall that has a lot of shelves to it. When I say shelves, you know, it falls down, and then there's a little shelf, and it falls down, there's another little shelf. And that one's, a drop shot's good because you can throw it right up against there. It falls straight down, it lands on that shelf, and you can shake it and work that shelf. And believe it or not, in the springtime, bass will spawn on those shelves, and a drop shot is excellent to be able to catch those fish that are spawning on those shelves. So drop shot's another thing. Maybe a crankbait, a deeper diving crankbait. I typically don't, because a spinnerbait is a little bit better than that, but that's always an option. So, well, let's jump in the front of the boat and get on this wall and see if I can't catch some fish, and I'll show you guys how to fish each individual bait on the bluff wall. Hey, subscribe, come on, hit the little button and hit that little bell too. What that bell does, it lets you know when I post a video. All right, so let's start out with a spinnerbait, since it's pretty much the one that's the most self-explanatory. You want to get right up against this seawall, okay? It's a nice little shelf right there. That'll come into play here in just a minute. You throw it right up against there, and you're paralleling the seawall is all you're doing. You let it sink down to depth, count it down, find out how long it takes to get 10 feet deep, and then do your math and multiply or whatever, and fish it between 0 and 20 feet if you want. But what I do as a spinnerbait is I get as close as I can, boat-wise and everything else, to the seawall as I feel comfortable. If it's a windy day, I back off of it a little bit. Not so windy today, I'll get right up against it. Now let it sink down to whatever depth I feel like. And I just parallel the seawall, popping the rod as I'm doing it, making the blades flutter, just trying to make it look like a bait fish, and trying to get that bass to come off of the wall and hit it. And I found that if the bass are suspended off the wall, this works better. What'll happen is the bass will get out away from the wall 4, 5, 6 feet. And if you throw that bait between them and the wall, they're gonna come and crush it. And they use the wall to ambush the bait and to make it to where the bait cannot go anywhere. And so it really works well that way. Now, most of the time they're not suspended off of the wall. Most of, smallmouth will do that, spotted bass will do that. Most of the time they're hanging out right on the wall on a shelf. And that's why, once I determine that they are on the shelf, the game gets really fun for me. All right, so I grab a Texas rig and I flip it along the wall and I let it sink down to whatever shelf there is, or if there's, I try to find, what I'm trying to find what is below the surface that's going to hold a fish. Now, a lot of times if you see this bluff wall, let me poke this thing straight up there. This bluff wall has a little bit of an overhang. So if the river channel wasn't running up against it right here, I would say there isn't a shelf, okay? And so, let me do that again. So if the river channel runs right here, the edge of it is right here, and it runs up against the wall right here. So I know there's a shelf right there, but typically an overhanged bluff wall either has a rock pile at the bottom or it has no shelf at all. It's just one straight vertical drop. So I throw up against the wall, and I'm literally through an inch out in front of the wall, and I let it fall directly on a slack line so it falls straight down. I'm watching my line the whole time, and I'm just going along the wall. Couple of hops, bring it back. All right, so when you cast in there, you got to realize when you pull that bait out, if you pull 3 inches and there's nothing there, it's going to fall, and it's going to keep falling until it gets all the way to the bottom. So the biggest thing is you're fishing it really, really slow. You're not moving it away from the wall much. So you throw in there, turn and show you guys. Okay. So you pitch in there right up against the wall. You see this spot right here that's kind of eating away a little bit? That's a rock slide. That's where the rock is given away, and there's actually a rock pile right here. That's one of the key things you look for. It'll hold a ton of fish, and it comes way out, so you kind of have to watch it and be careful. And it's just like a point. It causes the bait fish are swimming along the wall, and they have to go out and around that point, and the bass are hanging out in the rocks, and they're ambushing the bait as it comes by. So that might be something I throw a square bill at or something like that. But very, very key. A lot of trees overhanging. This is a perfect spot. It's just, I think it's a little too shallow right up in there, but I just work it out real slow. Now, water clarity determines how far away you are from the seawall. If it's muddy water, you can get right up against there, and the bass are going to be right up against the wall with their bodies up against it, because that's where they feel the most comfortable. The clearer the water, the further out you got to be. I Typically in this water clarity, it's about 4 foot clarity. I like to be a good 3/4 of a cast away. And that's a pitch, that's not an overhand cast. And so I'm being really, really careful about how far away I am, because if they see you, they're probably not gonna bite. So you really gotta pay attention to that. So this is a beautiful bluff wall. It's gorgeous. It's not my favorite kind of fish. It was just really pretty. So that's where I started the video. I'm gonna work my way along it because the back end of that bluff wall is really the kind of stuff I like to fish. We'll get over there and we'll talk a little bit more about what I'm doing and why I like it so much. All right, so if you guys are interested in more information about the rods, the reels, the tackle that I use, I always put a link down in the description to Tackle Warehouse so you can see all the specs and what's available and the prices and all that other stuff. So click on them down in the description. All right, so let's talk about the times of years. The time of year that the bass will get up against the seawalls. To be honest with you, it's all year long. I've caught them dead of winter, I've caught them pre-spawn, spawn, summer, fall. Typically fall they move back further in the shallows and they feed, but you can still catch them along the seawall. It's not a primary, ooh, I thought I had a fish. It's not a primary pattern, but it might be something that has a few good little keepers in it. So all year long. That's why I love to fish them, because you can always get out here and at least catch 1 or 2 fish off a bluff wall. A bad seawall, or one that I typically won't hang out around, is one where if I'm a cast and a half off the bank and I look down and my fish finder says 16 feet of water, 17 feet of water, I want it to be 30, 40 feet. I want it to be really, really deep. That means that wall is super steep. Another thing I don't like are the ones that are just straight with no anomalies in it. This one, getting into a good little section of this one, but this one is got a little bit of both. It's got that section right there behind me that's all straight with nothing there. It's only 12 feet, 10 or 12 feet out in front of it. But as I get a little bit further down here, the river channel butts a little bit closer to it. So that's when I'll slow down and fish it a little bit more thoroughly. Now, as I'm working down these seawalls, I'm looking for certain things to cast to. You got to realize that current is flowing along that wall, flowing that way. Anything that's going to create an eddy, even if it's a small eddy, you see that rock right there that kind of juts out just a little bit? The water will hit that and make a little eddy right there on the edge of it, and the bass will sit right there. If there's a shelf or there's something to hang on to or be close to, they'll sit right there. You know, anything like a big log. So you get to the other side of this and you've got a little bit of you got a spot right over here where it jets in. Okay, it's one of my favorite places because they will sit right in the corner. And there's a snake sitting right there too, I think. But they'll sit, ooh, let's not hit the tree. No, it's not a snake. They'll sit right there in that corner and hang out. And of course I threw it right over that limb, but that's okay, I let it fall down. Ideal spot, especially if there's a lot of current flowing, they'll be sitting right there. All right, so when you cast up against the seawall, especially when you've got a vertical drop, I'm finally in 30 feet of water and I'm this close to the seawall. When you throw right up against it, you want to bring your rod tip, watch this cast again, all right? Throw right up against it and look at where I ended my cast. My rod was almost straight up in the air. And then I follow it down on a slack line. The key is you want to make sure that that thing falls as straight as you possibly can. So it has to fall on a straight line, on a slack line. And huge, huge thing. Those bass are, if they're not in the mood to bite, they're not going to get far from that wall. Let it fall right on down. You might even give it some line if you've got to get it deeper, that kind of stuff. And I'm hoping that I get a stop. You know, as it's falling, I hope that halfway down, part of the way down, it stops. That's one of two things. A bass just bit it, or there's a shelf down there. And if there's a shelf, then I'm really going to pay real close attention to each cast. I'm going to try to hit that shelf as many times as I can because it may run a full length, you know, boat length or 2 or 3 boat lengths all the way along the seawall. It also might be when you use a drop shot, but Not today. See the formation of the rocks going down this way at a slant, and it's obvious that they're going to go out into the water. So that's what I look for when I'm looking for a shelf. And it doesn't have to be a big shelf, 6, 8 inches wide, all the way up to a couple of feet wide. But if I see rock going down into the water like that, I really start to pay attention, because I want to be able to find as many of those shelves as I possibly can. So I'm going to pitch this area really, really carefully. All right, so I cast it out there, let it sink. There's a shelf that's right there under the surface. I'm going to drag it out till it comes off of that shelf, and then I'm going to let it fall on a slack line again. And I'm literally only moving it 2 inches, maybe 3, hoping it doesn't get hung in the rocks. Let it fall back down, give it some more slack. And if bass is gonna be anywhere, it's gonna be on the edge of that shelf or on the next one down below it, if there is one. So this is literally what all I'm gonna do. Now I'm moving along. You see right here, got another little spot right here that goes way up in there, a little cut, little cave as I call them. Boy, if that water goes up in that cave, you better get a cast in there. But it doesn't. But still, it gives you a cut, gives you a little break in the current. Now, as they start to pump more water through the dam here on Chickamauga, you're gonna get bass closer and closer. They're gonna move in and be real tight into this, this seawall. But look at that, love it. Every little piece of cover. This is when your casting practice in your backyard pays off. You can get it in the little bitty holes, work it through. My favorite is a whole tree that lays down into the water. You don't see those very often, but boy, when you do, hold on tight. There's gonna be a fish in the end of it. Skip up underneath there. You ask yourself, hey, I can't cast like that. Practice, dude. I'm telling you, when the fishing is horrible in the summertime, I spend a lot of time just practicing my casting up under docks and into little places. Seriously. If the fishing sucks, then at least make the most of your time on the water and get better at something. Well, this is the last bluff wall on this end of the lake. Hopefully, I can catch one. The better bluff walls on Chick are way about 30 miles up the lake. I was there yesterday. I'm not making that run again. So hopefully we can catch one on this wall. But we shall see. We shall see. It's not a very big one. There's one. Oh, he's in a tree. There, got him out. Ooh, smallmouth. Yes. Let's get him in the boat. Nice. There was a tree down there I didn't see. That's why I use 20-pound fluorocarbon. Come on, spin around. I love to catch smallmouth. Nice. All right, let me run you through this real quick. Got a little cave right here, a little drop off, a little bit of rock down there, and I just brought it off that rock, and evidently there was a tree down there I didn't see. And he thumped it, took me into the tree. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, let's go over this real quick. Bluff walls. 2 choices, parallel it or just pitch to things. My favorite way to do it is to pitch to any kind of anomaly, anything you see that might hold a fish. Experience is where you will learn how to do that and do that well. But I tell you, it is so much fun. I've caught big fish, I've caught small fish, I've caught smallmouth, largemouth, spotted bass, everything off of a bluff wall. So it's an absolute blast. Well, like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water, go out and catch some fish, and have a great day. We'll see you.